Last week, we spoke to photographer Tamara Staples, who shared her love of cooks with us. This week, we wrap things up with what her books bring to the audience. Is she working on a new book? And her thoughts on animals as living beings and food. This and more on today's episode of the Nutrition Heretic Podcast.
Meet Gina. Gina wanted to lose weight, so she spent 2 years fasting, detoxing, and dabbling with vegan diets while practicing a shit ton of yoga to lose 25 pounds. But it took so long that nobody noticed. Then, Gina started Frenching her food by eating fatty cheeses, butter, sausages, and red meat, and lost 15 more pounds in only 2 months. Everybody noticed this time. Frenching your food unlocks the riddle of weight loss that skinny French chicks use to slim down, look young, and live longer despite doing everything wrong. Be like Gina. Start Frenching your food today by visiting nutritionheretic.com/Frenching.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being.
So tell me the difference, like why people would choose one of your books over the other, Ferris Fowl versus The Magnificent Chicken. What do they bring to the viewer?
Well, the Ferris Fowl was my first book that came out in 1999? No.
2001.
Thank you. 2001.
I remember that.
It's hard to think back. The second one came out in 2013. But 2001. And that was the first one that I did, which was really exciting. And oddly enough, another chicken book came out 3 weeks before mine and got a lot. It kind of stole my thunder. I was not happy about that. But, it's one of those things that no one has ever heard of this topic, and then all of a sudden there are 2 books, right. Which was great. And then when I after the first one came out, I was having a lot of shows, and I do a lot of chicken things, selling prints and for magazines, and I'm a sort of an authority on purebred poultry. And then I moved to New York during that time and had a child. And I'm a commercial photographer, so I was doing a lot of commercial work. But I really wanted to do another topic, and I really missed going to the poultry shows. In the first book, I was living in Chicago. And so my poultry shows were like in Wisconsin and Indiana and Illinois and Ohio. And I really enjoyed going to those poultry shows and meeting those people and just seeing what kind of birds the Midwest was really into. And then after I had the baby, I decided that I really wanted to do more. I felt like I wanted to do more with the chickens. I had grown immensely as a photographer. I kind of, when I started doing the Ferris Fowl, I really did not know how to shoot on location. I mean, it took forever to just, I would bring the wrong equipment, or I'd borrow a car and I'd break down. And, it's just like I was really trying to figure out how to go on location. But then the second book, I was shooting digitally. That was the other thing. The first book I was shooting with film. So I would shoot one roll. I shot with everything with my Hasselblad, which is square. And there's only 12 images on each roll of film. So I shot 12 images of each bird.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the second book, I had a digital Hasselblad. And so, you could just shoot and shoot and shoot, which, I didn't get that many more honestly, but I felt good about that. And that was really exciting because now I'm living in New York and I was going to shows in New Jersey and Connecticut and in Boston and, just a different group of people and a different group of birds to sort of being able to compare and contrast. And that was just cool. And with that, so I started taking 2 assistants with me and I took a van full of equipment and like 20 different backdrop choices that were different every single time.
Right.
So I went a little bit more to the extreme and I had a really great time. I just loved so much. So the Magnificent Chicken is a few of the images from the first book. So it's just a more expanded version and it's hardcover. So that's the difference, is that I wanted to do something entirely different, but it's not quite where we got. In fact, one of the things that I did was I wanted to include portraits of the people, of the breeders, because it was so fascinating what these people did in terms of living their lives for these shows. And they were just such interesting people. And so I spent some time traveling around and going to people's farms and photographing them. And then when I got the book deal for the second book, they were not interested in the people. And I was so disappointed. So I ended up reaching out to a magazine called Backyard Poultry. Oh, yeah. And for about 2 years, I would write, and this was like a really interesting challenge. I would write articles about the people and they would feature a section with the portraits that I took and portraits that I did of their birds, along with the story of how they got into breeding chickens, and and then would also give tips on their breed or special ways of dealing with the problem that bumblefoot or whatever it was, like leaky gut or whatever birds have. Leaky gut, I don't know. So that was really fun for me, and I got even further into like understanding the world of poultry.
Right. It is. I mean, it's. I find it fascinating because, like so many things, we take it for granted, right? It's just like, I'm sure that when you first went to that poultry show with your uncle, that you're probably thinking, what the hell? Because to so many of us, especially, we're about the same age, right? Once upon a time, an apple was an apple, right? There were like maybe 2 kinds, right? An orange was an orange. There's, and the chicken was a chicken. It was just like one thing, right? And to find out that there's hundreds and hundreds of varieties, I can totally see how anybody can get into something like this, because just to illustrate, before I became a nutritionist, and when I was kind of loosely, just like most people, interested in food, and I am from New York, and I would go to Chinatown for a lot of my shopping. And so sometimes I'd have a friend with me, and usually somebody who didn't give a about whatever they ate, but they would walk through the Chinese markets with me, and they'd be like, is that what, whatever looks like? Is that what that fish looks like? Is that what that, like what?
Oh, my goodness.
I didn't know there were like 17 different types of starch you could use in cooking or whatever. And it really does. And so like every time we would go to the Chinese market, it was like opening up this big world. I mean, for myself all the time, but for some of my friends who really had no clue the variety of food that was available, right within their own city, no less. It really opened it up. So it became almost like a Sunday afternoon activity, like going to the zoo or an aquarium or something, to just walk through Chinatown and identify things. So I can kind of see where this would be very similar, where you take this kind of, what most of us think of as kind of a banal, experience of chicken, right? Just, well, I'll just have the chicken. But to realize that it expands to its own culture.
Well, it's I think most people think of your white chicken,
yes,
right?
Your
that you
Leghorn.
put in the pot. But there's been a couple of ways that well, for instance, Martha Stewart made chickens very popular through her magazine, and because she had her own variety of chickens that were purebred, of course, and then she named some of her paint colors after some of the names of the chickens, and which is maybe one of my favorite things about the poultry shows. I'm going to read you a couple of the names because these are so awesome. Like I was telling you about one of my favorite birds, the modern game. Here's one that's the color is lemon blue modern game bantam pullet.
Wow.
Isn't that a great name?
It is.
Old English Creole bantam cockerel. Now the pullet is under a year and the cockerel is under a year as well.
Right.
Blue Wheaton Old English bantam cock. Golden Seabright bantam cockerel. Belgian bearded Deucle Millefleur bantam cock. I mean, the names are like Golden Campine large fowl cockerel, Blue Cochin bantam pullet, Salmon Feverall, the Dark Cornish, the Silver Dutch, the Partridge Wyandotte, the Silver Duckwing Araucana, Black Wyandotte, Dominique. It just is so fascinating. I just love the names.
The names are almost romantic.
It really is.
Yeah.
But they all have a specific meaning. Like, for instance, the white laced red Cornish large fowl cock. I will break it down for you. White laced is obviously the lacing is white, but it's a red Cornish. The color of the body is red, and then the Cornish is the breed. And then there's two types of chickens or birds in the poultry shed. There's the large fowl, and then there's the bantam.
Right.
And that's a difference in weight. And then cock. So it gives you the color, the breed, the size, and the sex, and the age of the sex, right? If it's a cockerel, it's younger, and if it's a cock, it's the older bird. So it is in a certain order, which helps you to identify. There's a name for that kind of thing, isn't there? But I cannot think of what it is when there are specific names.
That's not nomenclature, is it?
I know that was the word I was thinking too, but maybe that's not it. I'm not sure. But I think another thing that's really interesting is that the French, and you probably know about this, they often, they're known for their chicken. That's their the country. Isn't that the country bird or something? It's the cock.
It's actually the country bird for a lot of countries.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Portugal. I want to say Japan uses it in some stuff. I know the crest of French royalty often had the cock on it.
I thought it was the national bird, but I may be wrong.
It entirely could be, but I know, like when I went to Portugal, there were cocks everywhere.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah, and so it's
it's all over the world. I mean, the usage and the different ways in which every culture has incorporated chickens goes back thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah,
through trade and ritual. But what I was going to say about French cooking is that, and you probably know this, but they can even be as specific as using a certain age of a chicken and a certain breed of a chicken for a specific dish.
Yes, there are definitely, and then there's and then you get into the castrated cocks, why am I drawing a blank?
Capon.
Capon. But yes, there are some, like the breast chicken is one that is, it's gonna cost you to get a breast chicken. But yeah, they really do get into that, and they're almost mythical after a while, some of the dishes, and it's like, how do I try, especially if you don't live in France, like how Go track one of those down.
But even mythical, I mean, beyond food, some people use it in ritual, like religious rituals.
Yeah.
There's like there's one ritual, and this might be Israeli, I don't know, but they're like over a newly married couple's bed, like to wave a chicken over the bed,
really?
Brings fertility. I actually read a book called The History of the Chicken that was that I did the cover for. And anyway, I'm drawing a blank on like 8 million different ways, but through trade and food and religion, and it's so many uses of the chicken. That's what I find most fascinating about where we are culturally now with the birds.
Right. And it's so universal. That's, it's almost like if we wanted to really, break human history down. I mean, we could talk about the dog, of course. We could also talk about the chicken, because the chicken's been there, and it's so symbolic throughout so many cultures, from ancient Greece to modern China and Japan. I mean, like in France and, all these different cultures. There's so many things that you can go back to. With that. So it's a very, humble animal, but, I think it's, maybe it's coming up on getting its due and getting its day in the limelight, right? Where we're finally acknowledging like, chickens have been with us like pretty much forever.
They really have. And we eat more chicken than any other meat by a long, long stretch too.
But I think that's more particular to the US though, right?
Is it really?
I do believe so. I do believe that it's the number one meat in America for sure.
And what are the other? What are other people eating?
Beef. It depends on where it is. Like Europe, I'm going to say probably beef is more common in many countries in Europe. Again, that kind of depends on where you are. Beef, pork. I would say the Germans probably eat more pork. The Italians definitely. Well, maybe. And again, it can't be universal. But I'm also gauging a little bit by looking at cookbooks, especially like older cookbooks from a lot of these cultures.
That makes sense.
You don't see a lot of variation on chicken necessarily, but you see a ton of beef, like in Italy. A lot of Italian cookbooks, they'll have like, pages of beef and rabbit and, all these other meats and, like maybe, 4 chicken recipes. And it's like, really? You don't do anything beyond cacciatore? Like, really? That's all you got? But then you go to, Greece and, you might start seeing more lamb. Fish. And, so I think it does vary depending on where you are. But I would say like probably, with like North Africa through Southern Europe, and when I say Southern Europe, I'm thinking specifically about places like Greece. You probably see more of the, lamb and maybe goat. Then you're going to, the Balkans. You might see more of the mutton type stuff. I know the Brits love mutton. But yeah, I think the chicken phenomenon, as far as like the food that we eat, is, I think that's a little bit, or maybe even a lot heavier in the U.S. than it is in other parts of the world, the consumption of chicken. And it's not that the other ones don't eat it. I just think that we eat disproportionately more than other people. And it's probably because you and I, before we got on here, we talked a little bit about cholesterol. Or I talked a lot, you listened. And
I learned a lot.
But in the 1970s was when they made the big chicken push, for everybody to switch over to chicken from beef. That was a big turning point, I think, for our diet in the U.S. was in the 70s, where they really started pushing chicken, and then they were like, "Oh, well, that's not good enough. Now it's got to be boneless, skinless."
Okay, great.
And yeah,
I live for the chicken skin.
I know, right?
I do.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Nice and crispy.
Yeah, I got to tell you though, when you eat a cock, the skin is like really thin and it rips very easily. And I'm sure there's many people out there who would agree with me that you don't want to, you don't want to beat up the cock skin. So
But for flavor, you can't beat it.
Oh, it's true. It's true. And I think, I was joking about Jamaicans. That's one of the reasons, because it's a flavorful, bird. It's more flavorful than the hen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So are you working on any other, chicken books?
I just, not another book. I just did a series of cameo portraits that National Geographic just put up on their website in March. Mm-hmm. And that was really exciting. That was a whole series. I'm off to doing other bodies of work. There will definitely be chickens in my future. I don't know how yet, but I love the people. Yeah. They're good people. It's truly an American experience to go to the poultry shows.
Well, see, now I want to go to a poultry show. I never thought of doing that.
You really should. They have them in Hawaii, I'm sure of it. But it is really something special.
Right.
It's an American experience. It really is. And I enjoyed the people. I still have lifelong friends from that experience. And I spent probably about 15 years going to poultry shows and photographing them and being in touch with people and dealing with that. And I still show the chickens, and, they are published everywhere. So, yeah. And more importantly, I dream of the day that I'm in a situation where I can own my own chickens.
Well, yeah, that's going to be kind of tough in New York City. But you know who does have chickens? And actually, you might even know her. Maybe you met her at a show. Isabella Rossellini out on Long Island. Yeah,
I did not know that.
I just recently, around the same time that I ran into you, I ran into an article about her. And she's got backyard chickens, and she talks all about how she loves that. And I guess she grew up, partially in Europe with some birds. And so now she, in between her Lancôme shoots or whatever she's doing, she's digging in the dirt and getting down and dirty with the chickens.
I love that. I feel like my future will definitely be out of the city. I foresee moving to the country and I've never had a garden. Yeah. And I dream of that one day with some chickens and maybe even some goats.
Ooh. You're in for a treat. But that's the thing about modern life. And maybe this is, maybe we'll bring it to a close so I can let you out of here. But modern life, I think, for a lot of people, because many of my recent interviews, we've talked about kind of the increases in suicides recently, and anxiety and depression, and all of the factors. Because you and I, before this interview, we talked about how cholesterol plays a role in those kinds of things, and other nutritional deficiencies that could play into that. But when it comes down to it, I think that what's happening also socially is that many of us are not finding a lot of meaning in whatever jobs we are told we should want because they make good money, because, whatever the excuse is, right? Mm-hmm. And through an extension of that, through an extension of mistrust of doctors and mistrust of food system, more and more people seem to be turning towards the homestead, having that little garden, having a couple of chickens, having a goat or a cow, really connecting with something. This is going to sound a little trite, but awe-inspiring, where you really see the action of nature and maybe start to make sense of some of the things that are going around us, right? Really add another dimension of things being meaningful again in your life. And as a mom, I don't know if this happened to you, but when I first had my daughter, I was like, wow, this is what it means. Yeah. It's like everything went from just me and my husband, and we were having a good time or whatever, but there wasn't a lot of meaning to things in a way. And when we had our daughter, it was like, oh, like your perception of things like totally changes.
Oh, it does.
Right. And I think that, communing with animals and plants, I'm actually a little bit more in awe of plants than I am of animals, because, that's another really just fascinating experience when you really understand how plants work and how they respond, and how closely their nutrition mirrors human nutrition.
Yep.
That is, and I'm not saying because, plants are a good source of nutrition. I'm saying, like, when you feed a plant, sour things, it's very similar to feeding a pregnant woman something sour, is what I'm talking about. And, and it really has you thinking on another level. So I do believe that in the future, farmers are going to be our, big money earners, and rightfully so. And I'm talking about small farmers as people, move away. And, I think people are going to try to get back to bartering systems.
That would be lovely.
Of, like, oh, I raise chicken, you raise beef, let's do a trade. It's, I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. And I think that, we're going to be forced to be more civilized in that sense, and more sharing and caring, and really getting down and getting our hands dirty.
I want to live in that world, please.
Come to Hawaii. I got a job for you.
Wow. That sounds dreamy.
Alrighty. Well, Tamara, is there anything you would like to leave people with to contemplate the next time they're looking at a plate of chicken?
Well, just know that a being gave its life for your meal, and that being had a personality and was quite beautiful when you eat your chicken. Right. So I love the idea of, I think it's the Chinese who leave like part of the animal with the dish so that they can remember, that I think we're so far removed from when we get our chicken and it's a lump of white meat.
Right.
Like maybe pluck a chicken, or try to take its guts out, or just like get a hole in and put the foot on the plate just to remember. I don't know.
Right. Well, yeah, I have, that's actually part of the reason why when my friend invited me to slaughter 50 cocks, I said, okay, because I needed to understand from the ground up what the experience was and what the sacrifice was going into that food. The other way that I pay homage to these animals, any of them, because I eat a lot of protein. I eat a lot of meat. I've never been shy about that, because my body requires it. Some people can get by with less. I seem to require a lot more. And, but I don't waste any of it. We're a very, very wasteful society. About 30% of our food gets wasted. And often people are more willing to sacrifice the meat on the plate and toss that in the trash versus any of the other, foods or non-foods that are on the plate, right?
Right.
So, I save all my bones. I make bone broth out of those. And I've done this for 30 years now. Like before bone broth was a thing, I was like, oh, this just makes everything taste better. And I was broke. So,
right.
But yeah, we use as much as you can. And now with my little farmstead, it's like nothing goes to waste because I can turn bones into I'm not going to, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to say fertilizers. It's not really a fertilizer, but I can use it in my garden for various things. The charred bones of animals are actually extremely good for toughening the skin of fruit. So, thinking of the calcium and giving it that inoculation so that bees won't sting it, or, makes it harder for them to sting it at least. These are things that, like I said, all of this stuff comes full circle. So, and you can always find a way. And by the way, well, that chickens are cannibals. But a lot of times the bone, I make stock, and now those bones go out, and the chickens will pick everything off the bones. Then I can use them for my gardening. I mean, it's like we're pretty much zero waste now. If only I could find a way to get stuff without plastic.
I know, right?
But everything else, it just all goes back into the earth, one way or another.
Wonderful.
So I wish you luck in finding your happy space and being able to find your garden, whether it's a community garden or you go out to visit Isabella Rossellini and tell her that you're there for a photo shoot that she forgot to put on her calendar. But yeah, I wish you luck, and thank you so much for bringing us these beautiful chickens, because I've seen some of the photographs. It's phenomenal, and it's more than just a coffee table book. No, it's a real education. It's really, really, it's art. What you do is art, and there's no mistaking that. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our time.
Same here. Bye.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nicola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean. And our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.